Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. We have Ak. He'll be here any minute. We have Kevin Allen from USA Today. We'll do the intros in a few minutes, but we always do our little pre-show. I have to give credit to somebody who follows me on Twitter who last night during the Maple Leaf game found an interesting pattern that was going on. James Van Riemsdyk scored in the first period a power play goal. He scored his 34th of the year. The next goal in the second period was Austin Matthews, whose number was 34. He scored his 29th of the year. The next goal about a minute and a half later was 29, William Nylander. It was his 16th of the year. And at that point, this person, John Clark ATS on Twitter, sent out, does that mean that Marner is the next to score since Marner is number 16? And lo and behold, 9 seconds into the third period, Marner scores, and my Twitter timeline blew up. I mean, this guy got about 500 retweets and about 1,000 likes. It was fantastic. So
yeah, that's fun. That's a fun little coincidence.
Yeah. Now, of course, it ended there because Marner had scored his 20th goal of the year, and Dominic Moore had been a healthy scratch, so it was over. But credit to him because I thought that was pretty good, and he got a lot of.
I like that. Those are fun little things.
Yes. Now, Russ, there was a list on ESPN that has raised a bit of a hubbub, and
most dominant athletes in the last 20 years. They claim that most, if not all of them, had graced the pages of ESPN, the magazine. When you get past the self-promotion part and get to the list is a lot askew, like a lot of lists. But like as an example, number 20 is Tom Brady.
Yeah, I heard that he was 20, and I think Peyton Manning was 3.
Yes,
and that's obscene because you have to weigh championships. I mean, Manning's got 1. Manning's got unbelievable career stats regular season, but everybody knows the problem with Manning is that, I'm not saying choke because maybe his teams weren't as good, but he won 2 Super Bowls, 1 at the very end of his career. I mean, he's not as good a quarterback as Tom Brady is.
No,
there's no problem with Manning. To phrase it like that is ridiculous.
None.
No problem with Manning, but Brady should have been much higher. There's no doubt.
Right. So you go through the list and you say, all right, there's that, and it was one writer that did the list, and then you see Lauren Jackson's number 13. She played in the WNBA. All right.
Who?
Lauren Jackson, yeah.
Lauren Jackson. Mayweather's 8th. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I like it.
You haven't told us who's first.
Well, first is Tiger Woods, and I don't have a problem with Tiger Woods. The biggest problems that I have with this list is number 4 is Jimmy Johnson. Again, putting a NASCAR guy in this list is crazy to me, especially when they talked about periphery sports when they set this list up. Like, hey, we didn't include everything because they're not all majors, and they're sort of including NASCAR now in the majors. And so it's like, okay, you can if you want to, but it's not like Jimmy Johnson.
Put the WNBA in. You got to put NASCAR in.
Well, all right. So Sidney Crosby's not in the list. No hockey players in the list. So there's that.
Yeah.
Anderson Silva from MMA is not in the list, and he was probably their most dominant guy for a lot of years, him or George St. Pierre.
Just for the names that you've mentioned, I have a problem with Mayweather being as high as he is because he's undefeated, but he has selectively picked and choose especially they waited 3 years to wait for Pacquiao to get old enough for him to be able to easily beat him, which is what a lot of people think. He waited when Pacquiao had a chance to beat him. He evaded him, and then finally, after a few years, he said, "Okay, I'll fight you now for a big purse." And he knew the Pacquiao was basically over the hill because I don't think he's won a fight since.
Right now, Kev, answer me. Like, what would Sidney Crosby have to do to get? What else could he have done to get in this list?
Yeah, he should be on the list. I mean, you look at what he did even in the last 2 years, MVP in the playoffs twice, World Cup MVP, back-to-back championships. He's done it all. It's ridiculous he's not on there. I agree with Mike. I would push Mayweather down as well. Tiger Woods I would have number one because
now Michael Schumacher's in the list too. So it's two racing guys. He's 7th, but yet no Michael Phelps. And this guy Keating, who did the list, he explained away Michael Phelps because he said there was really like nothing to quantify how great Michael Phelps is. And I'm thinking, yeah, there is. The fact that nobody could match him in any event means that he was dominant to the point where he should probably be in the top 3, to be honest.
I'm not trying to disparage this list, but it smacks of clickbait. It really does, because I mean, I don't
think they tried to make it as clickbait, man. I think they tried to just do a show around it and put it in the magazine and get people talking. So I don't think it was clickbait. But I mean, if you don't have Michael Phelps in the same vein as Tiger Woods, LeBron James, and Peyton Manning, you're crazy. He's better than Peyton Manning as far as an athlete in his sport.
I probably would have had Brady too. I might have had Tiger Woods, Brady.
I mean, Brady's definitely in the top 3 as well. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any problem with the list, but I would have had. I know a little bit about the WNBA, not a lot, but Lauren Jackson was a dominant player, but I'm not sure that she deserves to be that high. So yeah, it's a nutty list that have. I think Manning deserves to be up there, but not ahead of Brady.
Russ, to be honest, if I was going to put Sidney Crosby in the list, I would probably have him 6th behind Roger Federer, but ahead of Annika Sorenstam. I would have to have him ahead of Annika Sorenstam.
You know what? I might have Federer.
Yeah.
2nd or 3rd, actually.
Russ, who was the highest baseball player? Was it Bonds?
It was Bonds 17. Which again, they said may have taken illegal substances.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there an asterisk next there?
May have. Yeah, that's fantastic. And then 18 is Mike Trout. Now, to be honest, I mean, again, if you wanted to take out Bonds because he's not clean, Clayton Kershaw is dominant. Like, I don't know how much more dominant Clayton Kershaw needs to get.
Hey, how are you guys?
Yeah, that's fair. I can't think of another baseball player than Kershaw that I would.
Yeah, I love Mike Trout, but he hasn't been around all that long.
Well, okay, you're talking 20 years. That's 1998. Honestly, I think Mariano Rivera. I know I'm a Yankees fan, but he's talking about the most dominant closer in the history of baseball, and we're talking about 98 is just at the beginning of his ascendancy as the premier closer.
And for the conversation, for sure, I think that's fair. Yeah, he's at his position. A lot of big games we've seen in a lot of playoff games. It's an interesting list.
Okay, Mac, we can start the show.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Sorry for the delay. You know how they say the error came between the error for this computer program happened somewhere between your head and the keyboard. So it was. I made a mistake on my projections for the Sharks that kind of threw it off a little bit, and I just had to correct that. So everybody was getting on me today, which is pretty good. I don't have the Sharks. I do want to talk to you about the Sharks record, schedule the rest of the way, and how difficult it is for them. And I think that they're not in as great a shape. Everybody's putting them directly, absolutely, positively in, and they have won 6 in a row, so it's hard to go against them right now. But I want to explain why my thing projects them to only win 2 more games because of the way history goes, and that's why mine is objective and not subjective. Based on their record against the teams they're playing that they're left with, they've battled really poorly against over history as far as history goes. So we'll get into that, but I wanted to get to that. But we'll start the show here. So I just had to correct that because everybody was losing their minds, and I do apologize. I did one like this last year with the Kings. I made one big blunder, and man, people find it right away, which is impressive. So I appreciate how much everyone's paying attention. That's for sure. So here we go. What's today's date? What the heck? I'm sorry, I lost nothing.
Friday, March 20th.
I totally lost my spot altogether. All right, thank you very much. All right, ready to go? Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, March 23rd, 2018.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen from USA Today Sports.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And so just to kind of continue my thought for a second there, even though I was wrong on my future standings were wrong because of error. I've been killing it with my predictions lately. Well, the projections on the computer have been just destroying it. Like we went 8-2 last night, 10-1 the night before that. So
we should go to Vegas.
I know I should. Everything's coming up Millhouse, as they say on The Simpsons. So we're doing our best. But anyway, so yeah, so last night, the game that kind of stuck out to me last night, which was really a battle of two really strong teams right now, was the Columbus-Florida game. There were a lot of games last night, but Columbus made a real statement in that game. I mean, both teams took 33 shots. It was a tight game. It was obviously a goal. Bobrovsky played out of his mind, but Florida's been coming on like crazy. Columbus now has won 10 in a row for the second season in a row, which is really hard to do. Not many teams have done that in history. So, I mean, this is just crazy. I mean, New Jersey is still very much in this too. I have a tendency to think that Florida is going to beat out New Jersey at the end of the day, but all of these teams are just like, all the teams in the East are so close. I don't think it matters where you finish. I mean, I really don't think it matters at all.
It matters to one of them.
Yeah.
One of them won't be finishing in the playoffs.
Well, if you're not in the playoffs, yes, of course it matters.
This Columbus run too reminds me of one of the few times I was on. It must have been a month ago, where Mike and I, I brought up the point about how frustrated Tortorella was with this Columbus team, and I think, I think it's still true. Like, I think he really likes this team. Like, I think he likes all the players on it. I think he has a good relationship. Seth Jones told me how much he likes playing with Tortorella. I think Tortorella likes that team. And I think he was because I made the point that I thought that he was so frustrated with this team, because everybody knows, and that was the point Russ said, well, Russ says, what's a really good team? Well, it is a good team, but everybody knew that. But I think Tortorella understood how good that team was. Like the way they're playing now, like, he knew they were capable of going on this kind of run. That's why he was so frustrated, and why I sensed when that I had talked to him that this wasn't just a coach mad at his team. Like, he was totally frustrated, because I think he saw this coming. Like, he knew they were capable of this. And the way Seth Jones is playing now, Colby Armstrong said last night, why isn't he in the Norris Trophy talk? Because he should be. I mean, Seth Jones has had an
should be in the conversation. There's no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. He's had an incredible season. And his 15th goal last night. So
I don't think we can underestimate. We talked about it a couple days ago. I don't think we can underestimate the little tweaking moves that Jarmo Kekalainen made at the deadline, getting Vanek, adding an experienced two-time Stanley Cup winning defenseman in Ian Cole, getting Letestu, who's been a good fit on the fourth line. Now, they got Wenberg back. I watched a game where, Dubois in overtime probably should have gotten called for a penalty shot. I can't remember which game it was, but it was a few days ago. But Dubois is playing effective two-way hockey, Russ, which for a guy who's,
I mean, short of the haters last year, that's what I kept trying to tell everybody he could do. But everybody was like, wow, look how high he's drafted. And, it was sort of like the Van Riemsdyk blowback. And it was ridiculous. And it shows that, yes, he can. And I'll tell you, he's in the best shape of his life. I mean, if you see what this kid looks like as far as physical build, you'll see why he can do what he can do.
But most importantly, in the last, I'd say, month, the guys who scored last year and hadn't scored in the first 60 games have begun to score. Atkinson is scoring. Boone Jenner is scoring. And it's always been the problem with Columbus, is getting enough goal scoring to support Bobrovsky. But Kevin, the thing that I want to see Columbus win, but right now, after winning 11 games in a row, they're tied with Pittsburgh, and they're probably going to play Pittsburgh in the first round, and that's death to that team.
Yeah, it's tough. Although, the way they're playing now, they really look like they're, ready for the playoffs. I mean, you can't feel great if you're Pittsburgh to watch all this and knowing you're going to have to play with them, because that's going to be it's going to take a lot. Even if you win, it's going to take a lot out of you. I think that team's hard to play against. And, Bob has been a big everybody knows how good Bob is, but, when you watch him during this streak and you're going like, wow, like what a weapon he really is, to have someone who can play at that level and raise his game up as he has been in the last 10 games. Like they have all the parts. I do agree that and I think that could bite them in the playoffs as they're scoring. like,
I don't know. See, Kev, now here's the thing. For weeks until he got recalled up, I was screaming that Milano could score goals for them. He's got 13 goals for them. He's got 3 points in 5 games lately. He's got more goals than Boone Jenner. He's a goal behind Werenski, which again makes Werenski great. He's got more goals than Borkstrand. He's 2 behind Dubois. Like, he's one of their best goal scorers. And now they've figured out a way to sort of keep him in the lineup and not worry about his defense. I think that's as big an ad as anything, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's always harder to score goals in the playoffs, and and you don't always have to have a big time goal scorer to succeed in the playoffs. But they just goals get harder to come by, and you prefer to have those guys that can stars who can rise up and do it in the postseason, and that's where they're lacking.
I mean, Panarin's got 25 goals. He's got postseason experience. I think he's been stepping up the last month. To begin with, he's up to 69 points. I think he could be that guy.
Yeah, but the one cautionary tale, though, and as we've seen over the last few years, and it's a trend. Bobrovsky has not come up big in the playoffs. He's been great in regular seasons, but when it comes to the playoffs, he's been sort of pedestrian. So that's got to change for them to have a chance.
That's fair.
If he doesn't come up big in these playoffs, he could he could be out of there. I think honestly, as well as he's played, I think there's a point at which they're gonna have to make some decisions on him because he's
got 1 year after this.
One more year after this, but this could be a situation where you don't re-sign him, and he's going into a year where you're gonna let him go to free agency. So this is the big year coming up for him. I mean, the interesting thing, I'm going to show you guys something. I thought this was pretty cool. About these standings, because we talk about the different things first about the different matchups coming up here. Last night, let's talk about Nashville, Toronto for a second, because I want to get into Nashville too. Yeah. Toronto, obviously, the power of getting Austin Matthews back.
Well, it wasn't.
The emotional lift that you see from that though is very palpable. You can see it.
There's a danger in that too, Eck. I think guys were waiting for Austin Matthews to come back, and I think that's a problem.
Well, I mean, they haven't exactly slumped without Matthews. They've
been good, but to do that to Nashville hasn't. That no one's done that to Nashville.
Well, and let's put it in context here, because remember, on Tuesday, the Leafs were up 3-0 late in the second period in Tampa and gave up 4 consecutive goals, and Tampa won 4-3. I have a feeling Mike Babcock read them the riot act. He basically said, you've got to put together a 60-minute effort, and if you do that, you have a much better chance at winning. And they played arguably their best game of the year, because I thought they were consistent throughout. They were tied 1-1 in the second period. Matthews and Nylander get a goal like 1 minute and 38 seconds apart, and 9 seconds into the third period, Marner scores. And most importantly, when they're up 5-1, they kept their foot on the pedal. They didn't let up. And that's the thing. They've traditionally, when they get up 3 or 4 goals, they relax, they sit back, they let the other team take control. And that's the problem, because they're not good enough defensively to hold even a 3 or 4 goal lead at some time. So they've got to play that 60-minute game, and they did last night.
Right. And at this point right now, so you look at the Predators and you look at who they could play in the first round, and you look at Colorado, is a possibility. Anaheim, possibly, if San Jose were to fall off, like my thing says they could end up playing San Jose. The interest, maybe even LA, right? So you got LA in there too. So you've got all those possibilities. Colorado, and I don't know how much you guys put into matchups in the playoffs. I've always put a lot into them, especially when they're
matchups mean something.
As crazy as this is, Anaheim. I mean, the Predators are 9-0 against Colorado in the last 9 games, just straight up 9 wins. That's a big. I mean, last year Colorado wasn't very good, but 5 of those wins are this year.
Well, I can go back to if you want to go back to a different sport. In 1988, the Mets were 9-1 against the Dodgers in the regular season and lost to them in the playoffs. So I think hockey's way different than baseball in this. It's still regular season though. You can't put too much weight on it.
Yeah,
I mean for sure. And like last year,
I'll give you a glaring example. In the regular season, throughout the first decade of this century, the Ottawa Senators dominated the Leafs during the regular season. How many times did Ottawa beat Toronto? 0.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's all true. And I mean, I looked, so I ran through a bunch of different scenarios to see who could get to the Stanley Cup Finals with the matchups the way they face right now. And it's interesting how well it sits for both the two teams that were there last year. for the for the Predators and the Penguins. The Penguins have an interesting thing because of all the teams in the playoffs, the Penguins have really good records against all of them except for one that's not even necessarily going to make the playoffs, and that would be the Devils. The Devils have actually owned the Penguins the last couple of years, right? So, but the chances of the Penguins playing the Devils, it's possible. I mean, it could happen. The Penguins could get in the first place and end up, but that's they have great record against the Flyers and the Blue Jackets, the two teams that they're most likely to end up playing.
I'll tell you what, when and if the Devils match up against the Penguins, I will bet you on it. You could have the Devils.
I'll take it. Well, I mean, I'm not saying they're going to win it, but I'm just saying that there is a history here that is really kind of fascinating. And the same goes with the Predators. I mean, when you look through it, it's really interesting. I tried to do my yesterday's blog, my best case scenarios and worst case scenarios of who teams want to play and who teams want to avoid in the Metro Division, and the Metro Division is crazy. Like Columbus has a terrible record this year against teams that could possibly play in the playoffs.
But these teams are ever changing. Like we're
talking about this year. This year,
I'm talking about this year. Yeah. When Nashville adds Ely Tolvanen, they'll be a different team than they were from the rest of the season. When Columbus got these players, you have to. That's why it's hard to match them up because they're always changing.
It's tough. I mean, it's almost, and I'm not saying it is this act because I think it's an interesting thing to read, but it's almost an exercise in futility to try to match what they did last year. Because I mean, Columbus is a different team. Right. Dubois is a year older. They've added to their defense. They're a different team than they were last year. They're scoring better. I mean, but maybe Bobrovsky is playing a little better. Oh, yeah. They're different. I think Washington is a completely different team. They're not as deep. Polpe is not playing as well. So to really try to gauge, and in Nashville, I mean, okay. They're going in right now. Their number one center during the Stanley Cup final is not even playing center right now. He's playing the wing on the fourth line.
Oh, yeah. No, the Predators,
I did playoff capsules for the first 30 years that I covered the NHL, and the playoff capsules always included how they did during the regular season and included a playoff history. Right. And one year I did a study on whether or not that had an impact. And I had looked at the 5 previous seasons, and it was 50-50, half the teams that won. So I would say, and one of the reasons we don't do capsules anymore is people have stopped reading them. Because I think people realize that the NHL regular season is so different than the NHL postseason. And, the Penguins have good records against a lot of teams because they've been so good for several years now. So they've dominated many teams, and it's true. And the Capitals as well. Of course, the Capitals have had great regular seasons, for a bunch, but the Capitals, have totally destroyed the Devils. It's interesting. So you have the Capitals who have owned the Devils have owned the Penguins. And this is the kind of thing I always find interesting because the Penguins have owned the Capitals, right? So when you go through this, it's fascinating how I do believe, especially fans, as a fan of a team, there are teams you want to avoid. Regardless of, I mean, you might say, okay, it's regular season, doesn't matter. But I know as a fan of a team, there's teams that when I was growing up, the Flyers, I never wanted them to play the Devils in the playoffs. I never wanted them to play the Rangers in the playoffs because you have that feeling of that team has your number.
Well, I mean, right now, even though there's a 6-point gap, Boston has 2 games in hand on Tampa Bay, and they play the Lightning twice. So right now, the matchup for Toronto in the first round is still up in the air. Looking at it objectively, I think the Leafs want to play Boston a hell of a lot more than they want to play Tampa Bay, even though, and this is the concern with Tampa Bay that I've noticed over the last couple of games. Andrei Vasilevsky, I think, is shot. I mean, I think he's exhausted right now because he's played so many games. They gave up 6 goals, Kevin, to the New York Islanders last night. I'm not slagging the offensive talent on the Islanders, but earlier in the season, I don't think Tampa Bay would give up 6 goals to the Islanders. But I think their defense right now is sort of getting organized with some of the new bodies they brought in, and I don't think Vasilevsky's playing anywhere close to the way he did midway through the season.
Well, that you're right, absolutely right about that. And I think we've all kind of written about that too. That Pekka Rinne's great second half performance has kind of masked the idea that Vasilevsky has become ordinary at best. He's been, his goals against average in the second half of the season has been over 3, I think. And that's certainly kind of speaks to the idea that he said, what, 2 weeks ago plus that he was tired.
He said he was tired and
physically. So, and for him to admit that, that's one of my big beefs with our profession is that we admire and we talk all the time. We wish that athletes would be more forthcoming.
Yeah.
Fewer cliches, a little more honesty, transparency.
Yeah.
We ask our athletes to do that. And boy, when they do that, they're criticized beyond belief. I mean, everybody's been all over Vasilevsky.
Yes, I would never criticize him for that. I'm with you, Kevin.
I don't criticize him either. He was just totally being honest.
Yep.
That he was a little tired, and now it's like, oh boy, you never admit that if you're an athlete.
Now's the time. You can't admit it in the playoffs, but you can in the regular season.
Right, but and I'm sure the reporters followed up with John Cooper, like Toronto reporters have followed up with Mike Babcock because Frederick Anderson, up until the couple games he missed last week, has been neck and neck with Vasilevsky in terms of game starts, and all you get from the coaches is, well, he likes regular work, and I'm not playing him in second of back-to-backs. But I'm sorry, playing a goaltender 70 games is just stupid. You have to have a backup.
I don't think it's a good idea in this day and age. I don't.
Well, some goalies, it's hard to find the right number. Every year we have that NHL media tour, and one of the things I always talk to Lundqvist about is how many is the right number of games. And it's different, I think, depending on your age.
It is. Like, Lundqvist needs to be under 60, but I think 60 is a good number.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think that is true. But I think there almost, especially with the goalies who are well established as the number one, like there really should be a conference. Instead of just telling how many you're going to play, it should be the goalie coach and you and the coach and the general manager sit down and work it out, and you should almost sort of look at the schedule and figure out the best way to do it. Like, these guys are so important and so valuable, right? You should work at it. But while we're on the subject about other things I hate that we do in journalism, and I'm really poking at fun at, or not poking fun, I think it's a just criticism of our profession is, no one crows more about hockey being a team game than journalists. And we all think that hockey is the ultimate team sport. Is there any disagreement on that?
No.
We all think that hockey is a great team sport.
Yeah.
That, you require a full effort to win the Stanley Cup. You need all your lines going. Everybody's got to contribute.
Would be a first place team with Connor McDavid.
Right. Yeah. You need that goaltender playing well. The defense, as we saw last year, like the Penguins personnel on defense, they weren't terrific.
Yeah.
But they played exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And we all talk about it's a team effort is required. So when a team gets knocked out of the playoffs, what's the first thing we do? Single out one player.
Right, we blame the goalie.
Always gets the blame. And usually there's a theme in New York. And fans and journalists like to blame Lundqvist. Yeah. And in Washington, it's all about Ovechkin. It's all his fault that he didn't get it done. And I just find that to be that's a really
good point.
Incredible contradiction that we view ourselves as the ultimate team sport, but we really, really have to blame one person when someone's eliminated from playoff.
No, it's true. I mean, look,
I love that. That's a really good.
Flyers fans have been blaming Michael Layton since 2010. He's not even in the league anymore.
No, I know.
That's the best line of the day, Russ.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think that's justified, actually.
But then he went on. Since 2010, Michael Layton has had this incredible AHL career, though. Like, that like he has set records for AHL wins, right? He's still going too. He's on.
No, I don't think he's playing.
He just got traded this year to somebody.
Yeah, but I think he's done now. I don't think he's
on the Penguins. I think he's on the Penguins right now.
The Penguins organization, but I don't think he's playing. I don't know.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I always wanted to make a point about this too. The having covered the league for a long time, in the old days, it was acceptable to call a guy a poor skater. He's a poor skater. And when I changed all that, was I went and saw Bob Rouse was coming back from an injury. I can't remember what the injury was. And I happened to be at the Red Wings practice that day. and I was waiting to interview somebody after practice, and Bob Rouse came out and skated laps. Now, Bob Rouse was a below average skater. Would everyone agree with that? He was a
sure.
below average skater. So I watched him doing laps as I was waiting for my interview, and the guy was just motoring all the way around the ice. And I'm watching all this going, I am never, ever, ever going to call an NHL player a poor skater ever again, because he may be below average, but Bob Rouse was definitely not a poor skater. I mean, he was just flying around that ice. And I think, we've all lost perspective, like what it requires to get in the NHL.
Yeah.
So I changed my mind. You never in my copy in the last probably 12 or 15 years have you ever seen me refer to anyone as a poor skater. Below average is the best I will do.
Here's a funny story for me that I have with that. One time I was at the sorry, the echo is crazy. So I'm at the skate zone. The Flyers come off of practice, right? And they are we're there because this is before I was covering hockey, and I'm there to play open hockey on the same ice that the Flyers just practiced on. I'm open hockey, so I go out there for open hockey, and a couple of the Phantoms come out. They were on the other, so they come out. I guess they wanted to get some extra time in. They're on the open, which is normal, And out comes Shel Samuelson, who is like who I thought of as a laboring. Like he's not a good skater. He's not a good skilled player. He's like a laboring newborn giraffe right on the ice. This guy was phenomenal, like absolutely. And he was shooting on me and destroying me, like, and absolutely like he was exhausting me. At one point he grabbed me and like, goalie, get up. Like I couldn't get up quick enough. I was just exhausted. He's grabbing me and pulling me up, this is Shel Samuelson, who I would not think of anything but a long reach of a defenseman. Skill, you're right, Kevin. It's ridiculous.
And what I do with prospects, I'm real careful, and I'll always hear, well, he can't skate or he's not a good skater. And look, like as an example, Tyler Toffoli is an average NHL skater, but he's got 107 goals. I just looked it up. He's got 107 goals in the NHL. So somehow he's making it do. And even just yesterday when the Flyers traded Cooper Marody, I hear people saying, well, he's not that good a skater. Well, he's leading Michigan in scoring, and he does know how to play the game. Something tells me he's going to figure out the skating thing. He'll get a little faster. He'll get some better training than even at Michigan. But at the end of the day, if you know where to go on the ice and you get there before the defense, no matter how it is, whether, if a guy just gets there, they can do it. So you don't and not everybody has to be a burner. They don't.
Yeah.
Luke Robitaille.
Yeah.
They said he couldn't skate, and he scored a few goals.
Yeah.
Tim Kerr wasn't exactly Michael Grabner.
Nope.
No. He had all kinds of issues. No,
and Michael Layton has played 2 games with Scranton Wilkesboro.
Yeah, see, I think he's done now. I just have that feeling.
Okay. It didn't seem like that long ago he was traded. I think it was right before the deadline, wasn't it? Or a little bit.
It was maybe like a few weeks before the deadline or a week before the deadline.
I think it was just moving a contract because remember these teams.
Yeah, I don't think he had been actively playing though.
Yeah.
No, actually, I wanted to ask Kevin about the Calgary situation now, because now the Calgary seems to be out of the playoff picture. I believe they're 6 points behind the second wild card. They made a move. Everybody thought, okay, this team has got a fantastic deep defense. They've got Goudreau, they got Monahan. They've added Yager, and that was during the offseason. We thought that was going to work, and it didn't. But we thought that this team was a playoff team, and the thing that Brad Treliving did that now is coming back to roost is they traded their first-round pick, not protected by the lottery, to the Islanders in the Hamonic deal. I mean, is Brad? I believe Brad Treliving just signed an extension, but is Gulletson in trouble? Is Treliving in trouble because they've miscalculated about where they thought that team was?
Yeah, they really did. I think we all did.
We all did. I thought they were much better.
I did.
I thought they were better as well. But and the thing that's bothersome to me was that, the lack of scoring was an issue for them. By the way, there goes my clock again. Yeah, I'm going to become a staple when I come.
I want a scooter crunch, a strawberry scooter crunch.
I'm going to get a good humor bar myself. So, but anyway, why this team? Russ brought it up before. Jarmo Kekalainen made a bunch of small acquisitions that really have helped his team.
Yeah.
And why why didn't Calgary do that? Like, couldn't they have? Like, wouldn't they look good in their lineup now as they've struggled to score goals? I think I did a little piece yesterday about everybody who had gone bad at exactly the worst time, and the Flames, I believe, if I remember correctly, have 22 goals in their last 12 games.
Yeah, nice.
So when they've needed it most, they haven't even been able to average 2 goals per game. So, if you're gonna trade away, your first rounder in the Hamonic deal, I think you almost should go all in and have given up a couple of picks and tried to, get in the playoffs for heavens.
I think the answer why they didn't do it, I'm not sure about cap space, but I know the first and second for next year were in the Hamonic deal, and the third they traded for Michael Stone with Arizona last year. So the highest pick they had was a 4th round pick. So they had nothing to trade.
This year they picked up Chris Stewart and Nick Shore. Chris Stewart lately he's got
and they picked him off waivers.
Yeah.
He's got 2 points in his last 5 games. Let me see what Nick Shore has done for him. Probably not enough.
Yeah, they were sort of pigeonholed there, but now
Nick Shore's doing nothing.
Yeah, so now right now they're at 80 points. They're 8 points out, so they're out. They're done. I think that's
probably cooked.
Well, getting back to what you asked, I think Tree Living is fine. I actually like him, and I think he's done for the most part a very good job there. And Gulletson really hasn't had enough time. I think they're fine going into next season, but it's like anything else. It's I look at a guy that I really think knows the game and say Jim Nill. Like, I think he's fine too if they don't make the playoffs, but I wouldn't want to miss if I was him, I wouldn't want to miss again next year. And the same would be true of Tree Living. I would say if they missed this year and next year, then.
Well, we talked about Dallas earlier in the week, Kev. I think, and I'm not to say that Jim Nill needs an excuse, but the Bishop injury really killed them because and they had to buy out one of those 2 goaltenders, Niemi or Lettinen. They chose Niemi, and he's pretty much been a journeyman around the league this year. Lettinen has been okay, but once you had to go to him as the everyday starter with Bishop out, we saw that he couldn't handle that job the last couple of years, and that's what's killing them right now.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And the one thing about Bishop is, I don't believe that players are injury prone because we've seen too many examples of guys. It's just lucky or unlucky. But Bishop has just had incredibly poor luck of the timing of his injuries, and like boy. For him to go down now, there couldn't be a worse time. And what really killed them was that road trip. And they had 6 games, and I did a little piece yesterday where I talked to Jim Nill about it, and he said he saw it coming. Last summer when the schedule came out, he was so worried about that 6-game stretch that he tried to get the Washington game moved. I mean, if you recall, they ended up it was Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, not in that order.
Right.
And then they had to go to Winnipeg and then had to come back for the 6th game on the road trip to Washington. And he tried to get that changed last summer, but because of arena availability, he couldn't do it. And he knew that was going to be a problem. I don't think he thought they would lose all 6 games. But that's really what's crushed them. And now they've got to win 6 of their last 8.
Yeah, and they had Montreal, Toronto back-to-back nights and went with Lettinen on back-to-back nights because the backup at that point was Mike McKenna. And, I'm not casting aspersions at Mike McKenna, but going up against, maybe you play him against Montreal, who's not been that great, but they went with Lettinen and thinking that was the guaranteed win, and they lost that game, and then they lost to Toronto too. And I think it was Tyler Seguin after the game, was commenting on the team not coming up big against an opponent that they had to beat in Montreal. Toronto has been a pretty good home team, but you need to beat the teams that you're capable of beating, and they didn't beat Montreal in that instance.
If they only had a backup like Jack Campbell.
Yeah, he's risen up fine. He's sort of renovated his career. Can I feel sorry a little bit for Tyler Seguin, who has had an incredible season. Like he was really
frustrated the other night, Kev. He got his leg planted against the boards. After the period ended, he smashed his stick. I could feel it, and I do feel for him.
Well, and let's give Hitchcock some credit too. I mean, if you've noticed, boy, he's given Tyler Seguin a lot of responsibility and killing penalties, and he's really empowered him. And not that the other coaches haven't, but it just seems different with Hitchcock. Hitchcock has sort of acknowledged his superstardom, and I just think Sagan's had a great year, and it's none of this is his fault.
No,
he's carrying the flag as well as can be, and Jamie Benn, who's a beast in his own right in terms of his ability, he really hasn't been quite the same since that injury a couple of years.
He had double hip injury, right? Like these things do take the starch out of a player. There's no question.
He's still good, but he was so dominant before, and now he just seems like just a little below that to me. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, and still on the hunt, but they're hurting, and I'm not going to blame it on Hitchcock either. And I can't blame it on Jim Nill. I think it's a combination of, like Mike said, the goaltending and some bad luck.
Bad luck. I really do think it's bad luck, and I would agree. And goaltending. Like the problem is when Bishop has gone down, that Lettinen has not been able to do the job. Yeah.
And here's an interesting little note to add to this. We're all talking about an underpaid guy like John Tavares being a free agent this summer. He's making $5.5 million, and he's going to get paid in, $10 million, $11 million around there, maybe even more, depending on how many teams get into the bidding war. Tyler Seguin's a free agent after next year. He's making $5.75 million. And what is he, 26, 27?
Yeah, around that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's almost as an attractive a commodity on the open market if he goes to the open market as Tavares. And we're talking about a year where all the defensemen are going out there as well.
I don't think he'll get to the open market though.
Probably not.
And I don't think you're offering any insight to the Stars. I think everybody's well aware that they're going to have to break the bank.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but I do think, I know Seguin pretty well, and I would say, he's very happy down there. He likes it down there, and I think there'll be no problem re-signing him. I wanted you guys to get your thought. The Senators just said, we're going to make an offer. How much do you think it'll be? This is just a total guess on what they're going to offer him. I think they're going to offer him $10 million a year, and then see what happens. What do you think?
I think they're going to go just slightly over 10 for 8 years, and knowing that he could get more somewhere else, but knowing that they could say, hey, we gave him a respectable offer.
Right.
Well, I think they'll negotiate from 10. I really do.
I don't think they'll negotiate. I think Melnyk will give one deal.
We'll see. Okay.
Yeah, I think that they'll make him the highest paid defenseman in the NHL, which is over Subban. Subban makes $9 million. So I think 10 and a half. 10 and a half would be the same level as Carey Price and Taves
right.
and Kane.
I think that's what he'll get, like 10 and a half, 10 points.
Yeah. But the thing is, Russ, with the cap potentially going up, the percentage of cap is less than those players. So in actuality, it's not the same as Taves and Kane's 10.5 when they sign the deal, or Price's 10.5. It's going to be a little less.
But you know what they're going to do, Mike? I mean, we've heard Carlson say, hey, my wife and I like it here. Yeah. They're going to make him show how much, or is it not enough?
See, what I don't know is, I think to save face, Melnyk has to make that offer. But I really don't think he even wants to put something even competitive out there. I think his goal is to trade him because he doesn't want to pay him that kind of money based on the fact he's 28 years old. He's had the Achilles problem.
I'm not sure of that. That's the one thing I'm not sure of.
Yeah.
I never get the impression that Melnyk thinks there's a problem with Carlson. I just think Melnyk has a line in the sand and won't go past it based on what his revenues are. Here's the one thing we don't know, Kevin. This was, of course, the game changer. Like, for all we know, Carlson may have said, hey, I'm not coming back. And if he did, then he is just going to make an offer, and Carlson won't accept it. And we won't know that or even get a feel for that until way after the fact.
Yeah, Russ, I agree with you. I do think that that they want to try to bring him back if they could, just because the franchise is not as valuable without him.
Correct.
And if you're trying to get a new arena and so forth, it's hard to sell. You know, if you're selling the team, if you're kind of promoting this team as being led by Erik Karlsson, it's a little bit different than being led by Stone and Hoffman. Mm-hmm. It's just completely different. So I think they'll make some sort of effort. I don't think they'll be willing to give them, 12 or make him the highest paid player in the league. But I figured they start at 10 and maybe go up to 10.5 or 11, and we'll see. I just can't imagine Karlsson will take less than 12. But
yeah. Now, is that a similar situation to what is going to happen with Tavares? Because I think that for the Islanders to keep him, he's got to be pretty close to what McDavid gets, and I don't know whether Ledecky is going to pony up that kind of money, or if that's even the most important thing for Tavares.
Yeah, I don't think it's the money. I think they'll give him what he needs to get, to be honest with you, because he's just so important to them. But
I don't think they're going to give him the highest amount, Kevin. I don't.
Well, we'll see. I think they will. I think they'll give him. I think they'll pay him $12 million. But we'll have to see. But does he want to be there? I'm starting to hear that the truth is that he doesn't know what he wants to do. And if that's the case, I think
there's some truth to that. But he's going to figure it out pretty quickly after the season ends. Yeah. And the fact that he hasn't really negotiated like he said he would a year ago tells me that even though he's saying that, Kev, he's pretty much wanting to see what's out there and doesn't want to say it. I think he knows that. I do.
Well, a lot of people think he's going to end up with the Rangers. So
I think there's a really good chance too, but I just think he wants to see what's out there before he decides. And I think he had decided that when the season began, to be honest.
Well, it's really interesting because Don Meehan was interviewed on Toronto radio earlier this week, and he talked about the whole Stamkos situation. Couldn't go into all the intricacies of it, but basically said that Stamkos was open to going anywhere, which goes counter to what most people have thought, because we all heard the whole Toronto scenario where, they brought in Canadian Tire and the mayor of Toronto, and Meehan sort of deflected whether that actually took place. But I mean, I've heard from a number of people.
No, that took place.
That took place. So I think he's just playing nice and, not wanting, I don't think it makes Stamkos look good, because he sort of shrunk from the opportunity to come back home and come to Toronto and and take less to stay in Tampa. But if that's what he wanted to do, and if he was comfortable in Tampa and they have a chance to win a Stanley Cup, that's all fine and good. But with Tavares, I don't know what the justification would be to stay in New York other than he's comfortable there. And if he's comfortable there and he gets paid, that's all fine and good. But the direction of that franchise right now, based on what they've done over the last year or so, I don't know what direction it is.
Here's my thought, Kev. Right now, the whole world knows the Islanders are out of it. So if I'm the owner, I would have gone to John Tavares yesterday and said, here is my offer. I'm giving it to you until the last day of the season to give me an answer. And we haven't heard anything. And so the fact that we don't hear even negotiations going on tells you that it's not all rosy there. Like, otherwise we would hear something, because Tavares was pretty good about at least giving updates last year and once this year, and then that's it. It's gone dead ever since that last update, which I think was around the All-Star game. And ever since then, it's gone dead. And the Islanders not in it anymore. So if you want to say negotiating with him during the season is a distraction, it doesn't matter. You can't be any more distracted. They've had over 20 games where they've given up more than 5 goals this year. So they clearly were not going to be a playoff team. So
yeah.
What's the holdup?
Yeah, no, that's a fair assessment. The problem is we just don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what's been said before. But I do think there's some indecision there. I think this is completely different, as Mike just laid out, because the Florida situation, there were a lot of pluses to going to Florida beyond even the quality of the team. There's the sunshine factor, the lack of state income tax factor. The fact that Steven Stamkos could have incredible anonymity down there beyond the hockey fans, he could navigate in his life with much differently than he could if you were in a major hockey market. So where Tavares is just has to decide how much he enjoys being around the guys on the Long Island, and I think there is something to that. I think he may not be happy with the direction of the team perfectly, but I do think he likes the guys on the team. I've been told that, and that he likes being an Islander. So we'll just have to see.
Coming from a lifelong person who lived on the island, has only been in New Jersey 20 years. I would have loved to stay on the island. The traffic sucks, but if you have enough money, you could be insulated from those kinds of things. And 8 months out of the year, it's a beautiful place to live.
Yeah. Well, and the other issue too, and the one that a lot of agents have brought up is don't underestimate the limited number of teams that there would be who could actually, bid for him. First of all, you eliminate half the league that he just simply wouldn't want to go play for.
Right.
If you got your options, it's nothing. He has anything against those places, but when you have your option to go anywhere, you just automatically eliminate half the league.
I think 5 teams will be in on him though.
So, well, there'll be more teams in on him, but it's where he'd want to go.
Sure.
Some of the teams that will be in on him, he really doesn't want to go to. So,
right. No, that's fair.
Yeah. So. I mean, I think last week I mentioned New Jersey as a potential because they have cap room. They're on an upward trend. I don't know how I don't know how feasible it would be for him to stay living where he is now and play for the Devils, but he potentially could do that. I mean, I think they have their future is better mapped out than the Islanders is, but yeah, I think it's going to be the Rangers, the Sabres, everybody brings up the Leafs, and I have to warn everybody: if the Leafs got in on John Tavares, there would be such an upheaval of their current roster. They couldn't prevent having to do that. They would probably have to trade one of Nylander or Marner because they simply couldn't afford to sign them to a new deal if they signed Tavares. No, it doesn't mean that they won't, but I just don't know if the will is there, Russ. I think
the playoffs will make a big difference in that, Mike. Like they're gonna go through the playoffs, and that may play a factor in it.
Let's throw this scenario out there. They sign Tavares, and they commit to their top 2 centers are going to be Matthews and Tavares.
Yeah.
Well, now they commit to trading Nylander or Marner to get the defenseman they need.
Right.
They might get Dahlin in the lottery. Like that's a reality. That if they do, and for all we know, maybe that's going to help John Tavares out.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I know it's, and I have to say, over the last couple weeks, the chances, the odds of James Van Riemsdyk re-signing with Toronto, at least the feel that I get from being in Toronto as often as I am, has shrunk significantly. He's now at 34 goals. It's his career high.
Yeah.
He's gonna hit a home run.
No, he's tested the market.
Yeah, and he wants to stay there. They want him back, but financially, I don't see how they make it work with the money that they have to sign some of these players that are coming up in the next 2 years. So, I mean, if it was a shorter term deal, I think that there would be a chance, but he is in a position right now at 29 years old and with a career high year. The stars are aligning. He's going to get 7 years at $6.5 or $7 million.
To get 7 years. We'll see. I mean, we're all watching what's happening with baseball, and I've talked to numerous general managers who think that's coming to the NHL as well. Like he's going to get his money.
Yeah.
Will he get 7 years?
Well, that's the thing. And I'm with Kevin on this in the sense that the Leafs might say, "Hey, JVR, we love you. Go see what you can get."
Right. And he could be the Kevin Shattenkirk of forwards. I mean, he didn't get 7 years. He got 4, but he got it at the big money. And if it was, he got it almost, I think, a little under $7 million. If the Leafs, I think there would be the will on the Leafs to do something like that. But if it's 6-7 years, then I don't think that they would be able to do that. Now, just to end the show, Kev, because there was the general managers meetings in Boca Raton this week. We've talked ad nauseum about the goaltender interference thing. We were talking before the show, and the only thing I think that the new changes will do is it's centralized. It's going to be the same retired officials, and there'll be more consistency with the calls, and I think that will hopefully tamp down any controversy. But I heard the talk about the salary cap. I mean, what other things did you think that were important that came out of the GM's meetings?
Well, not a lot actually. I think the fact that they kept the offside video review the same, and I think the one thing that really got a lot of play down there was the fact that despite the fact there's been a lot of controversy over the goalie, there was only, depending on who you talk to, between 4 and 6 decisions that the war room, the situation room, felt they would have reversed. So it's not like we're going to see a big change. And what I've said about this, and it's so true, and I know Russ has followed the game forever, and you have too. Like, this is so cyclical. Like, we'll do this year, and then we won't hear much about it for 3 years, and then there'll be another uproar in 4 and 5 years, and it doesn't matter. I mean, it's still a subjective act. So that's big. And the other thing was, obviously, they confirmed to general managers once and for all that yes, indeed, the new expansion draft will be exactly the same as the old one. Now, but here's the big difference, and I think this is why, if you're Seattle fans, I think you shouldn't necessarily believe that you're going to get all that Vegas did, because these general managers now have gone through this now once, and they'll know that you can trade. They're going to be trading more players to other teams before the draft, and I don't know that there'll be as much available to Seattle as there was to Vegas. Like, I mean, had it to do over again, wouldn't David Poile have traded James Neal to some other team? I think he would have. He would have gotten a lot more. I mean, we got something for him.
Yeah. And I also think that these teams leading up to 2020, if that's when we have the expansion draft, if it's possible for them to manage to have less of the no movement clauses that they have to protect.
Right.
So that will open up. I mean, that's where some teams, really opened up and were vulnerable because they had to protect certain players that they really didn't want to protect.
Yes.
And they had to give up, like, Anaheim had a lot of no movement clauses, including a guy like Kevin Bieksa, and they had to give up Shea Theodore, who's arguably been probably Vegas's best or second best defenseman this year.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, they're just it's like anything else. Now the current general managers are very familiar with how it all works, and they're going to react accordingly. And I just think it'll be harder. I mean, the worst job in the league in terms of GM job is to be GM of Seattle, because you got to follow George McPhee.
Right.
Like, he can't win.
Now, we did get an update on the Sportsnet show today at noon. Michael Fuda was on, and he did explain how it all went down. And his explanation how it went down for Tom Dundon was Dundon flew out there to see him after he called Rob Blake. And knowing Michael Fuda a little bit, when he said this was all happening like really fast and he liked what he heard, but you know what? I believe him. I do. I don't think he thought like things would progress that quickly, because Dundon was so aggressive in wanting to talk to him and possibly hire him, that I think that, Michael Fuda hadn't really had a chance to let it simmer. He had just found out from Blake. And you probably heard this too, right, Mike? So if I'm getting something wrong, let me know. But at the end, I just think that was kind of interesting that he really did just turn it down, simply because not because he didn't like what he heard, but because of the speed of it all. And so maybe Tom Dundon, because he's not talking about it in public anymore, wants to give the appearance that he's putting on the brakes, because there are guys that are pretty set in their jobs, and it would take a lot. And sometimes, there is something about moving at a slower pace to get it to happen.
And when it comes out, and it came out last Saturday, what was being offered in terms of financial compensation, you know, that had to be a little bit of a shot across the bow to Dundon, because when it comes out that you're offering $400,000, which is to me a low ball offer when it comes to a general manager job, just even that job is going to be challenging because there's a lot of decisions that are going to need to be made in Carolina. And I think if you're going to get a top flight guy, you're going to need to pay a little more, and that I think that's also going to be a little, or has been a little bit of a factor in terms of somebody not jumping at that job.
Yeah, I mean, Kev, we could be looking at weeks until they actually get a GM in place, and that reminds me again: will this GM and this owner go with everything that the current scouting staff is going to do? Because the scouting season, is getting close to ending. It's not ending yet. There's still the playoffs. There'll still be the Holinka. But then after that, you've got to be ready. And who's to say that that's the direction they're going to go in? Like, you almost want somebody in place soon so you know exactly going into this draft, because it doesn't look like they're going to make the playoffs. So you still need to hit a home run in this draft like they did with Netchus last year. Yeah,
I mean, I assume they'll be, if they don't get one in place. I mean, I think they're going to wait and see who is also available after the season ends, because guys are going to get fired. There'll be some better. I do believe that Dundon will pay for the right person.
Okay.
And thirdly, I think they're well prepared to just proceed with, Ron Francis's group. I don't know how they'll do it, but, Francis still works for the organization.
Yep.
Waddell could just head up the draft table, but the head of scouting could handle. He obviously has not. He's been a business side, but he certainly knows enough to know how to run a draft table and just bring in the draft. So I think that's what would be the contingency. But I think they may try to get something done before the draft. You would think. So.
I would think. I mean, I would think it would be advantageous to do it, only because it is going to. It's going to affect the direction of the team in a couple of years. And, you want to sort of have all that in a row if you really have a vision for this team. So I would think it would have to happen before the draft.
Yeah, no, you're right.
All right. Great show, guys. I hope everyone has a good weekend. We will be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, for Eck, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.